So here is a little video I made explaining a strategy I came up with that uses everyone's favorite troll from League of Legends, Singed. So recently Singed got some popularity from a guy named Druid Droid who came up with something called Proxy Singed in solo queue. So I took this idea, which actually got the guy banned for trolling, and turned it into a real 5v5 strategy. So I'm going to explain the pick ban process and the basic strategy throughout the entire game. So here is a sample team comp for the Proxy Sin strategy. So I came up with this team comp with specific players in mind, but I'm going to explain the reasoning for each pick so that then you can kind of fit it to whatever your champion pool is. So obviously the most important is Singed because the strategy is named after him, and Singed is going to be your top laner. For your jungler, you want someone who is helpful at pushing lanes quickly and also good at objective control. So obviously the big name in objective control is Nunu, and another good pick is Nasus. So both of these guys bring Nunu brings good objective control with his consume, and fast tower pushing with his blood boil onto the AD carry. Nasus brings fast tower pushing with his Spirit Fire, which helps to clear waves very quickly. So both these junglers are ones that assist in early objectives and towers very well. Your mid laner is actually not going to be mid in this strategy, but you want someone that can also assist in those objective fights and tower pushing. So you want someone with range and the ability to siege. So Jace is the ideal pick here because he can siege with his shock blasts, and he also has attack damage to take down towers quickly. Another option could be Lux. One important thing to consider with your top laner or your mid laner is they're actually going to be in a 1v2 lane for this strategy. So you want to pick someone who you can comfortably farm under tower with and not just die to the aggression of being 2v1. Your AD is going to be mid lane in this game. It's going to be AD support mid for fast pushing. So again, you want an AD that can abuse their range, such as Caitlyn, and can also take towers quickly. The ideal ones for this would be Caitlyn and Varus, just because of their wave clear and their tower pushing ability with their range, and their decent damage at early levels. Another possibility would be someone such as Graves because of the wave clear, but there's also going to be a decent amount of wave clear from the rest of the team, so the ability to actually hit the tower is probably more important. So that's why I would go with Varus or Caitlyn. The support is just going to assist the AD in that. They're going to want some decent wave clear and the ability to help siege towers. So Janna brings that with her Tornado and her shield. Another good one would be Lulu, who with Glitter Lance clears very fast and provides the shield and utility and all that for her AD to help keep him safe. So that's the reasoning behind all these picks, and now I'm going to explain what the actual strategy is here. So here's Summoner's Rift. This is basically how you're going to set up level 1 and start your first few levels of gameplay. With your mid laner is going to be down in the bottom all alone with the 1v2 lane. So here basically their goal is just farm as much as they can, don't die, try not to lose the tower. And they're going to want to put a ward in the tri-bush to help them not get dived by the enemy jungler. The other lane, the double lane, is going to be mid and just put as much pressure on the enemy tower as fast as possible. Your support is going to want to put one ward in this bush early on in the game to track the enemy jungler. The ward in this bush lets you know if they're going to red, if they're doing wraiths, if they're just skipping this area entirely and ganking bot right away. This ward gives you a lot of information. Singed is going to be up here farming in this corner. How he's going to do this is he's going to wait out of tower vision for the enemy wave to come through, and then as soon as he sees the wave, he's going to pull it down into this corner and then just pass back and forth over the wave with poison, and this allows him to kill the wave without any support around him, without his own minions, without anything, without taking too much damage. And what this is going to do to the enemy is he's never going to have minions in his lane, which means he's constantly going to be underneath his own tower unless they want to tank the minions, which no one does as well as Sin, so they're going to come out losing on this. This will most likely draw attention from either the enemy jungler or the enemy mid laner, who are going to want to try and kill that Singed. This is counteracted by the duo lane pushing mid lane really hard, because that makes it so that if the mid laner leaves, we get a free tower. And if the jungler doesn't assist the mid laner, we'll get a tower eventually. Not quite as fast, but still very fast tower. And if the jungler stays, then Singed is going to be free farming, and it's still going to be a 2v2 mid, which leads to the point where our jungler, Singe's jungler, will take both buffs and then can make a decision. If the enemy team is not helping mid, he can just let that advantage of the 2v1 lane do its thing, and the jungler can come bot and help save that tower. Or the jungler can decide to go mid and take that tower down even faster, depending on what's going on. So the first stage of the game pretty much ends once this tower dies, once the mid tower dies. That's when stage 2 starts. Now comes stage 2 of the plan. It's similar to stage 1, but with a few very key differences. The biggest ones are now the mid lane, which is the 2v1 lane, is further up, which allows them to apply more pressure and also take other objectives from the enemy, such as the wraiths and the wolves. This increases the danger on the 2v1 lane, but it also allows them to apply more pressure, putting more on the enemy and forcing them to respond more, which is what we want. The goal of this strategy is to force the enemy out of their comfort zone, responding to us. Singed will still be pushing top lane up here, still have his ward in this bush, which he can teleport to and also gives him good vision of this area. The ward in this small bush is still very important, because these two wards pretty much let you see all of the top jungle. The bottom jungle changes slightly, because now that they're further pushed, you want a ward in this little curved bush right here. And when placing this ward, you want to place it right at the apex of the curve, as far out as you can go, with your cursor still changing green. This allows you to have complete vision of the bush and this entire intersection. Another possible warding spot would be the blue bush here, with the same idea, where you want it at the apex of the curve as far out as you can go. One slight change is the bot laner now has a really reduced pressure because of all the pressure going on up here. So the bot laner should have an easier time farming, and can also ward further out, which gives them more time to react to ganks. Because of the wards up top, the likelihood of a jungler being able to circle all the way around is very low, so the bot laner can put his ward further up, giving him more time, letting him be more aggressive and farm easier. This stage ends once a couple key item thresholds have been hit. Depending on how the game's going, you'll choose different times to end this phase, but the most important items will be a completed machete item on the jungler, such as Spirit of the Spectral Wraith or Ancient Golem, a BF sword on the AD carry, and a Sightstone plus Pink Ward on the support. Those items are what kind of triggers the end of this just increased farming phase. Because at this point, you want to wait to force other objectives until you have that big item advantage. And you should hit these item thresholds before the enemy because of all the pressure added, you're getting their jungle, you got their tower, and all that. Once those item thresholds are reached, it's time for another objective stage. Now comes the fast objective portion of the game. At this point, you should have a pretty significant item advantage because your team will be backing right as they hit these item thresholds, which they should hit first. Now is the time to force your lead. The most important objectives that will be coming up around this time will be Dragon, Bot Tower, and the enemy blue buff. So if you can take all three of these, you'll have a very large advantage going into the mid game. So the main positioning points here are as the rest of the team backs to get their items and starts rushing towards mid, Singed will have backed slightly before and to get whatever items he can get, doesn't really matter what, just a little bit more, and then he will start farming in the enemy base. This allows one character to apply insane pressure to two lanes at the same time. Because he can grab both waves here, this means that mid lane and top lane will be pushing towards the enemy with no one in those lanes. This opens up the rest of Singe's team to apply pressure on all the other objectives. So as they come back in, you're going to want to pink ward dragon, take dragon. And then some of the same wards apply, but wards are slightly different this time. The blue buff ward is more important now because you want the blue buff. And since you no longer have the presence in mid, you actually want to place a ward in the lane itself, slightly out of the vision from the tower. This lets you see anyone crossing between this area, and if you place it right, it also lets you see people coming down the lane or crossing down here. This gives crazy amounts of vision, and they'll never suspect it, they'll never pink ward it. Singed, at this point, can either keep leaving his ward in the same bush, or if he wants, can lower it down here, because it's more likely that enemies will pass through this area going to meet Singed, where before they would try and cut him off going around the left. Once the two creature objectives are taken, the team can group up and take the bot tower. Depending on where the enemy team is, whether they're backing, what's going on, the order of these three objectives is completely up to you. But basically this stage results in 2 outer towers gone, dragon gone, the enemy blue buff gone, and a large gold lead. The jungler needs to be careful to still secure both of his own buffs, otherwise stealing the enemy buffs doesn't really help at all. Okay, so the team should have a very large gold lead at this point because of all the objectives taken. Now is the time to push this in for the win. Basically the same ideas apply. You want to keep pressure on the top lane, but at this point Singed might not want to farm in the enemy base anymore just because all the other lanes are going to be closing in, so he'll have less time to react and less space to draw enemies away from. So Singed can go back to just standard Singed things, just pushing down his lane, taking his towers as he can. The rest of the team continues doing what they're doing, pushing in the bottom 2 lanes, taking the next 2 towers, taking all the buffs, taking the objectives. At this point you're going to want to, once all the outer towers are gone, you're going to want to ward at the base of the steps, because this gives a large amount of vision and is the same as other lane wards. The enemy won't expect it, so they're not going to remove it. You're going to want to keep a pink ward on Baron, just so the enemy doesn't attempt some sneaky Baron for a comeback. From this point on, there should be a huge gold lead for Singe's team, and they're just going to do a standard split push end the game. Just force 4 on one tower, Singed on a different tower, siege out the enemy. When someone goes to respond to Singed, take the tower with the other 4. If no one responds to Singed, he gets a free tower. So that's the basic strategy here. So that is the basics of the Proxy Sin strategy. To be honest, I'm not even sure if it's a good strategy, because it mostly relies on the enemy team having no clue what you're doing and getting really annoyed at Singed. But it is certainly a fun strategy, so go out, make some people rage at you, and have fun with Proxy Singed.